with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, May 25th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Associate Professor at Seattle University School of Law, Dean Spade, author of Mutual Aid, Building Solidarity During This Crisis and the Next. Also on the program, a year after George Floyd's killing, no police reform legislation to sign. Blinken is in Israel meeting with Netanyahu, vows relief to rebuild Gaza after Israel bombed it, and wants a consulate in Jerusalem. DOJ is fighting the full release of a memo shielding Trump from prosecution. And on the Hill and at the White House, the infrastructure talks with the Republicans on the brink of collapse. And that's good news. New variant found in India, spreading now in Britain. Texas poised to allow unlicensed carrying of handguns by just about anybody. Debt limit suspension deadline looms. The real question is, will it kill the filibuster? And good news for me. New York schools will be going full-time in the fall. Also, good news for other people. It's the largest school district in the country. Florida becomes the 23rd state to sabotage workers as their unemployment benefits are slashed. Lastly, D.C. Attorney General files an antitrust suit against Amazon. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. Joining me, as always, Emma Vigeland. Emma, how are you today?
I am well. How about you, Sam?
I am also well. As you'll note, my voice is returning ever so slightly. I've not cleared out all the pollen that apparently has been resting in my throat, but I certainly feel better, and voice is getting a little stronger. That's good news. And I have to say, I am buoyed by the idea that we are very close. I think the deadline for the infrastructure bill was in about a week, but we're already starting to see activity on the Democratic side preparing for taking this infrastructure bill through reconciliation. So we get more legislation passed, more spending passed, and really, frankly, investments in making the country more durable and sustainable. We have a lot more to go, but this dance with the Republicans has been about as fruitless as one could imagine. They started, just to give you an update, the last time we were talking about this, really, in any measurable way, Shelley Moore Capito, I guess, and they were throwing around numbers, like what they would respond to the $1.9 trillion infrastructure bill that Biden was proposing. And they started saying things like maybe 600 billion, maybe 500 billion, maybe 700 billion. Their latest offer is $200 billion. They have literally lopped off 2/3 of their initial proposal in terms of what they were going to negotiate with Joe Biden with. Joe Biden countered the other day with $1.7 trillion. So they are $1.5 trillion apart now. Republicans are going to come back one more time, but hopefully we have now satiated the gods of bipartisanship who apparently need the Democrats to do a dance with the Republicans for weeks on end, knowing that the Republicans are just going to sit there and sort of rock back and forth. It's like one of those like really bad, school dances, like in elementary school, where, the half the kids just sit there on the sides, just looking at other kids.
Yes,
dancing.
sure.
And then the other half just sit on the dance floor, just sort of rock back and forth. That's basically what the.
Well, I
and
mean,
so-
Biden's like weakening the bill by giving a blood sacrifice to the bipartisanship gods, essentially, right? Like he, slices his hand, bleeds, says, "Will you take this? Will you take this?" And then, no, I mean, we're lucky they're so extreme. We're lucky they're, negotiating with essentially a phantom. That's helpful for Biden's purposes, even though, of course,
Well, I mean, that's true. Let me just say this.
Yes.
That was the thing that saved Social Security during the Obama-Biden years.
Because, I mean, Obama was like, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's privatize it. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't so much privatized.
Or cut it. Yeah.
It was cutting the COLAs, essentially, recalculating the cost of inflation for adults. And so the fact that what we called them Tea Party, they're just the Republicans, said, no way, that's what saved Social Security. And within a year or two, you had the Democratic caucus in the Senate voting to increase Social Security. But this is Capito in April. Here's a quote. She was asked why $600 to $800 billion was the sweet spot. And she said, this is in April. It's just a ballpark figure. It may not even be that much. I don't know. I just kind of threw it out as a talking point. And they're not serious is the bottom line. And so the quicker we get through this stage, the better. They will pass the $1.9 trillion. They're going to have to go through reconciliation, which is going to take a little time, but we'll see that. I would imagine now by mid-July. And then at the end of July, we're going to see we're going to get to the debt ceiling. I know folks remember this from the Obama years. It only comes up during Democratic presidencies. I mean, it literally comes up during all presidencies, but we only talk about it in the news because it only becomes an issue when the Republicans don't have the presidency. That's when they start to vote against it en masse. We borrow money, essentially put it on the functional equivalent of a credit card, except for we also own the credit card company as a U.S. government. And there is a pro forma, essentially, vote to raise the debt ceiling, which allows us to pay off the bills that we have incurred, essentially. And, or allows us to take on more debt, which allows for the expenditures that we've already expended. This will come up at the end of July. It is extremely close in the Senate. Folks know this. And so that may be where we see the filibuster reform on the must pass legislation of raising the debt ceiling. Now, there's other things that could be done, but conventional wisdom is that we need to pass this bill without going insolvent, without essentially the U.S. defaulting on its obligations for the first time ever on treasuries. And so that could very well be when we see the filibuster get modified, nuked. We're not sure. that could be the moment. And so they're going to want to get this infrastructure bill out of the way. Then we go into hopefully a filibuster-free period of time. It's possible. And pass some more legislation. Like, for instance, hopefully we will see some police reform bill sent to Joe Biden. And hopefully, although I would imagine highly unlikely, it will be even remotely sufficient. But here is Brian Kilmeade on the anniversary of the killing of George Floyd. Here is Kilmeade sort of saying that, sometimes it's not the crime, but rather the response, which is really the danger to society.
19 children in Minneapolis have been shot this year, an increase of 171% over the same period in 2020. The relatives wonder where the protesters are. Why ain't nobody mad about a 10-year-old, my grandson fighting for his life, asked Cherie Jennings, also another grandmother at May 17th mayoral event, because a cop didn't shoot him. That is the answer. So right now, as horrific as George Floyd's death was, our reaction's been worse.
Brian, let me tell you right now what's amazing. The George Floyd death was horrific. But what is amazing is all this crime in Democratic cities. The biggest mouths who are complaining about this racial injustice. In Democratic cities where people of color are running the government, you have black on black crime, you have attacks on police officers, and where's Al Sharpton? Where's Black Lives Matter? Do you ever see them when there's black on black crime?
There it is, of course, the problem with George Floyd's killing by the state, by the people that we pay to supposedly keep people safe. The real problem with that is that we now have black on black crime.
It's like so lazy. They've been doing it for black on black crime. I mean, decades at this point. This is what the talking point's been, and it doesn't matter that violent crime, I think recently there has been some sort of spike, maybe due to the fact that people were in economic desperation, at least in the short term, but on the whole, on the average, has been on the decline for many, many years, murders, etc. The Democrat cities, the Democrat-run cities don't get credit for that. When that happens, it's only just, to gin this up.
Well, and if folks are so concerned there, I would suggest let's reorient the police to where their only job is to solve murders. Let's put it that way. We can start with there because we have, only about 20% of the murders in this country are actually ever solved anyways. But it is an interesting take. Not interesting, but it is, like you say, a banal take that they deploy all the time. Which is, why are you complaining about the fact that we have the paid agents of the state killing people needlessly? Why are you complaining about that when there's other people killing other people? That is what that breaks down to. The idea that we could do anything materially about violence amongst civilians without first addressing the fact that the people who are supposed to protect civilians are actually responsible for killing them. I mean, good luck with that.
Yeah, the increase in the crime rate could be troubling. Also troubling is the increase in the things that lead to crime rate. And we should address those.
Indeed. I mean, and look, I'm quite convinced that COVID itself, the going through a pandemic is bound to have these type of sort of knock-on effects, which isn't to say that it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. But we clearly, the millions upon millions of dollars spent on the police obviously are not having any impact. And so that's, we need to reform the police in some fashion. All right, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back in just a moment. We'll be talking to Dean Spade, Associate Professor of Law at Seattle University and author of Mutual Aid, Building Solidarity During This Crisis and the Next. We'll be right back after this. Folks, just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. This is where we often have ads, not always, but sometimes. We don't have any today. If you want to get this podcast without any advertisements, become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. You get it ad-free. If you want the extra content that we do every day, become a member. You can do so at jointhemajority.report.com. If you want to just support the show, become a member, jointhemajority.report.com. Ads help us, but they're never going to be in any way a even remote replacement for support from our members. It gives us the ability to say to some ads, no, we don't do ads for gig outfits. We don't do ads for finance. We don't do ads for companies, even if we like them, that we find out are doing business in the West Bank. Sorry,
Yep.
It's a bummer, it's a huge bummer, but we just had to drop an advertiser. If they change their practices, we'll welcome them back. That would be the best case scenario. But so it's your support that makes it possible. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Also, don't forget, we have a Discord now at majoritydiscord.com. Totally free. Sign up, join, check it out, have conversations. We have over 3,000 people there now who are engaging in the conversation during the show, after the show. So check it out. All right. Want to welcome to the program Dean Spade, Associate Professor at Seattle University School of Law, author of Mutual Aid, Building Solidarity During This Crisis and the Next. Dean, I'm here with Emma Vigeland. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start more or less how you do in the book with defining mutual aid. What is it and what is it not?
Yeah, mutual aid is just a term for talking about the part of social movement work where we are directly supporting people's survival needs based in a shared understanding that the systems in place are not going to show up to do that. And we need to kind of take care of each other. And actually those systems have caused the crises we're in often, whether it's environmental crisis, housing crisis, the crisis of policing and imprisonment, et cetera. And what it's not, I would say, is it's really a term distinguished from charity. The charity framework is really common in our culture. It kind of goes back to, European Christian ideas that rich people can buy their way into heaven by making alms to the poor. And charity is kind of what our social services framework is based on. It's based on the idea that we should kind of hand out small Band-Aids to people who those who are giving it out decide are deserving. So it tends to be pretty system sustaining. It's like, oh, you're not sober, you can't get this housing. You don't have kids, you can't get it. You're undocumented, or you have a criminal record. It's kind of, it reifies the stigma in our culture that says that people who are on the bottom deserve to be there, and we'll just pick out the ones who deserve to be elevated. And it doesn't do anything about the root causes. It just kind of like keeps putting the Band-Aid on. So charity and mutual aid are very different, because mutual aid is about collective action and about imagining a world in which people are not in this crisis, and that nobody deserves to be without a home or criminalized or whatever it is. And so it's a really important distinction, because one is about collective action and the other one is kind of about sustaining the system and kind of good PR for the system and for rich people.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think the collectivism is so key to understanding it, right? Because so much of the philanthropic infrastructure is built on, wealthy people's ego trips, for lack of a better word. Can you just talk about how that dynamic of allowing just rich people to willy-nilly throw money at something as opposed to, say, taxation, and choose to pick and choose what they want to support, and if that's even effective, just contrast that a little bit more with mutual aid.
Yeah, I mean, our legal system of having tax-deductible donations, the 501c3 tax system that establishes nonprofits sets up the way our philanthropy works. And it's just as you say, it's that rich people can keep their money out of the tax system and then put it towards their favorite pet causes, which isn't mostly stuff that involves poor people. It's mostly like the opera or my university or my favorite right-wing charity or whatever it is. And so most of that money just gets kept out of the tax system, and they actually don't even have to spend it. They can keep it in their big pile. It's got their name on it. It gives them prestige. And then they only have to spend out a few % a year. They can also give kickbacks to their cronies by having like trustee fees to their favorite uncle or cousin. So there's all these ways in which the philanthropy system is actually about rich people keeping their money and not having to get taxed on it. And then when they do give it out, or when it does make its way through to organizations that are trying to do some good, they really get to decide what those organizations do. They're going to fund the ones that have an idea about change that they like, and they're going to not fund the ones that they don't like. So it keeps rich people in control in some ways of the horizons of possibility there. And they're not going to fund stuff that's a threat to their own well-being, right? To their ability to maintain wealth. And so what issues are popular or unpopular and what gets funded is determined by rich people's horizons. So a lot of us who are seeking bigger, deeper social change are aware that it's unlikely to come through things funded by that system. Whereas mutual aid work is mostly, and always has been, people volunteering, right? We've seen so much of this during COVID-19, but it's much longer than that. It's people just deciding to support and care for each other and help make sure that people survive while they're working on the root causes questions. A really good example that a lot of people are aware of is the Montgomery Bus Boycott, right? That moment is such a key moment in social movement history in the United States. A lot of people associate it with like famous speeches by Martin Luther King, because in our society, we kind of focus on those charismatic figures. But actually, if you really think about what the Montgomery Bus Boycott required, it required tons and tons of people to coordinate rides for tons and tons of people. And a lot of that work, not surprisingly, was done by Black women, right? So the underlying thing that makes that strategy to get at the root causes of segregation successful, right? And particularly to try to really uproot the possibility to build people power that says you can't run the system this way anymore, comes not from those famous speeches, but from all this coordinated labor of ordinary people that they were doing for free. And so that's very, very different than the philanthropic idea that somebody will graduate from a business school with a great idea of how to solve poverty, and then a rich person will fund them, and then that will end poverty. Like that sort of fantasy, that very elite fantasy, I think doesn't hold a lot of water.
To extend out on that, the example of the Montgomery bus boycott, right? I mean, the mutual aid supported the action, and so the sequencing there is, we're going to do this bus boycott. Rosa Parks is going to go on. She's going to refuse to go sit, and she's going to choose to do that. And then we're going to follow a legal strategy here. But we also need to be able, I mean, this is almost like the equivalent of a strike fund on some level, right? I mean, it is, but how does this sequencing work? Like, I understand as a support mechanism in providing the sort of like, the durability and the sustainability of an action that is protest or is, I guess all of these actions on some measure or another are a protest, right? But the sequencing and how does mutual aid protest or affect the system when it is not in support of another action? When it is just sort of like, obviously there's material benefits. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but in terms of like what it does, is it just the act of that organizing and setting it up for a future act, or what is it?
That's a great question. Yeah. So because mutual aid isn't always like tied to one specific campaign, like in the Montgomery bus boycott, mutual aid is something people are just kind of always doing to get by, particularly in communities and populations that have consistently been left out of basic needs and basic infrastructure. Like Black people have always had to do mutual aid to survive in the United States, Native people, queer and trans people, et cetera. So it's kind of just ongoing. And I like the way you said it. I think it's really about, oftentimes when we're doing mutual aid of that kind, where we're just like, wow, people are unhoused in our community. They're living in the park. We're bringing them stuff. We're, what part of what happens there is that people deepen their political engagement when they do this kind of work, and they come to understand the issues better. So if we're doing support to people who are living in the park near our neighborhood, we might come to find out, wow, I never thought about how this affects people with disabilities. And I also learned how being undocumented relates to having a hard time being housed. And I also began to think about, you learn all these dimensions. Oh, wow, I never knew how the housing system actually works and why it's so impossible for low-income people to get housing, or what this is like for veterans. And so why does the VA not work? Like we deepen our understanding, and we realize, wow, it's related to the transit system. And then there's a transit strike coming up, and we all decide to go out to the transit strike march together, the people from the encampment and everyone who's supporting them. And then the cops want to sweep the encampment, and we're like, you know what, let's surround the encampment. So I think part of what happens with mutual aid is it's most people's on-ramp to social movement work, either because they're a person in need of aid and they're like, these people are giving it out, and they think there's something wrong with the system and not me. Awesome. They're inviting me to collective action, or because I'm so mad about what's happening. It happened to me or people I love, or I saw it on the news, and I'm like, I want to be part of that. And then I go to do that work, and I really expand my capacity for solidarity and to understand the root causes. And then I'm swept up in like, wow, now there's a chance to go out and be on the front lines around that, or there's a chance to back up something that I've learned is connected. So this is, a lot of what mutual aid does is it operates as that on-ramp to political action, because it's a space of political education just by its practice. And also because a lot of times in mutual aid projects, people are like, yeah, let's also do political education with each other. Let's have a little workshop together about disability justice, or let's talk about toxic masculinity in case it's showing up in our group, or people are working together. So they're also like, let's make this more inclusive for everybody here. So there's lots of ways in which mutual aid is often tied, like when you see street medics at the protests, in the wake of George Floyd's murder, those street medics are directly supporting this bigger protest, strategy or tactic. But also there's the ongoing mutual aid that sows a field of people who are ready to participate in the next thing and the next thing.
On some level, it is analogous, and I know that ultimately the vision that you're expressing here is more radical, but it does mirror what unions did in some fashion in the past, right? Which was we're going to gather for, in the instance of a union, just because we work together and because we want to negotiate for some type of material benefit. But what it's going to do is deepen. It's going to politicize a lot of things.
Yes, I think unions are a great example, because unions are about building people power at their best. I mean, you're right. And so they're about building people power. And so it's like, how are we going to get together and have people power? Unions do things like strike funds, but they also do things like, in some places, like childcare support for people who are the spouses of people working there, or they build a health clinic, or there's lots and lots of ways in which anything that gets a lot of people together to have people power against elite power, mutual aid is going to be in there, because people, when there's concentrated elite power, people are struggling with basic survival needs.
And one of the aspects that you write about it in terms of what it does is it exposes the failures of the system. I mean, that may be a little bit more obvious to people, but just if you could for a moment, just explain in what context that happens, right? I mean, I guess like the most obvious one is like, wow, we didn't get, where's the support for, in the wake of Sandy, Superstorm Sandy, or, but there's other things that are more subtle that get revealed.
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID, that's so obvious, right? Like our government utterly failed to have meaningful, consistent support for all the people who lost housing and childcare and income, right? Like there was just so many people have become impoverished during this period. Meanwhile, of course, a few people have become incredibly wealthy. And so look at how that tends to work, right? But yeah, so I think that, I really like the example of the Black Panther Party's survival programs for this, because there's this really beautiful documentary about those programs in which there's this woman who talks about how her family went to get free breakfast when the Black Panther Party was doing free breakfasts, lots and lots of different cities. And she describes how it was so destigmatizing to show up and be like, oh, you're not bad because you can't feed your kids. Actually, we're in a space where we actually think this is because of anti-Black racism, and we're going to get together and fight anti-Black racism. And the shift from feeling stigmatized for being poor to feeling power, people power, community power, to say, no, this is wrong. Like that kind of the way in which the system's failures are being exposed, instead of if she'd, her and her family had probably also gone to like welfare authorities and try to get food stamps. And all of those processes are about saying, like, are you good enough to have this? And are you eligible for our program? And have you done anything wrong? Or do we have to take it away from you? And constantly being, verified. And the Black Panther Party's program and all that, there's so many programs like that during the 1960s and 70s movements and ongoing, is saying the system is at fault. And so I think that's true with anything we do. If we're looking at, there's so many unhoused people right now in the US, and there's encampments in all of our cities, and people are doing a lot of mutual aid in those encampments. And they're also trying to stop the cities from sweeping those encampments and policing them. And there's been some pretty big, huge, like $1 million sweep of Echo Park in Los Angeles in March. And, these kinds of things are happening all over. That is just forcing to the surface this conversation about, like, why are people unhoused? What does this have to do with city policy? How are wealthy developers supported and corporations in our cities, and not the people who are actually the most in danger of not being housed? And why are we spending $1 million to have the police raid this encampment instead of spending that money on housing, which is the obvious need? I think all of this comes to the surface very intensely in mutual aid projects, because people are just really up close with how the crisis is being produced in individual people's lives, and how many other options there would be for, like, government response or for a different approach that doesn't keep concentrating wealth.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this too is Sam briefly mentioned Sandy, and just kind of, or whatever hurricane it might be, is because a lot of government responses to crises are about essentially just putting a stoppage in the leak in the short term and not addressing things kind of in a long-term way. Is a lot of your, emphasis on mutual aid about building long-term systems in communities that can kind of sustain themselves over time, as opposed to just having, say, the federal government come in and without any really existing infrastructure, attempt to do something that is largely impossible if you're approaching it from that way?
Yeah, I would argue, I'm so glad you brought up this, like, hurricanes and thinking about disasters. I would argue that those disasters are created by the government, right? Like the failure to fix the levees in New Orleans, or the failure to make sure people's housing is shored up for the kind of weather they're facing, not to mention the fact that we still are contributing to climate change, and the government will not reduce the things that would actually make climate change, that would curb climate change. We're still building it, right? So if we see these crises as produced by the government, and then FEMA, when it shows up, when the federal government shows up to do emergency management, they show up late. Mostly the government response is things like policing people, shooting people on that bridge in New Orleans. It's the response tends to be more militarized and less about saving lives or making sure people can evacuate or whatever. And then, like in Sandy, they gave people loans. They gave homeowners loans to fix their houses. They're not giving people what they need, and then they usually give almost nothing to, like, renters or itinerant people. And so that, as usual with poor relief and disaster relief, you see, like, any relief that comes more likely to go to white people, more likely to go to upper class people. I also think about the Camp Fire in California, Paradise, California in 2018. That fire was caused by PG&E, right? PG&E is this kind of, like, really big, utilities company that can't really maintain its structure well because it's really big and operating for profit, not to do a great job, right? Just count how skinny can we make this? How big can we make the profit margin? And then, because of that, they cause fires. The first thing that the state of California does is pass a law that says that nobody can sue them, right? Like, the first thing California does is protect PG&E, not the people who are facing the fire. And then they come and, the cops evict people out of the Walmart parking lot who are still living there, who have nowhere to live. And people today in Chico and that whole area are still disproportionately homeless because of that fire. So the government doesn't do disaster relief. And if they do, it's usually just to move money around in ways that benefit a few corporations and sometimes maybe wealthy homeowners. And so, given all of that, I think it really shifts our idea to exactly what you're saying. Like, what would we as communities want to put in place that would allow us to actually begin to try to prevent disasters and prepare for them? And I'm really relying on a lot of Naomi Klein's work to talk about this, her work around disaster capitalism, because she's like, yeah, when the disaster comes, they just do things that benefit big corporations. And one of the things she talks about, and a lot of other people are talking about as well, what would it look like to do things like, if we had a much deeper level of community participation, which I think for a lot of people starts with being part of a mutual aid project, we might get to conversations like, wow, I'd really love it if our community didn't use PG&E for our electricity. Could we do something with solar? Could we do something with wind? Like, could we have a mini grid that's not part of this really dangerous grid that PG&E does? Or could we be networked with other communities in our area in a way where it's more governed by our people? Or how do we want to do healthcare? There's a program in Oakland that I think is really useful. It's in a Black community where they've identified that if people call 911 around health issues, health emergencies, the police always come with the ambulance, and it's really, really dangerous for Black communities. And there's a lot of times that Black people get hurt or murdered by the police when they show up instead of getting the healthcare they need. And so this program called the Oakland Power Projects is deeply training people in that Black community to do emergency healthcare that includes mental health response, acute care like gunshots and things like that, and chronic care like diabetes and those kinds of health issues. They're like, we're just going to create our own way of meeting this health need because the way the government is offering us is so dangerous for the health of our community. So I think that's the ultimate vision for me of mutual aid, is like, how do we move from kind of being passive participants and just having to accept the very like inadequate and harmful responses that are supposed to address our needs, and instead, like, let's make the responses that we think would help. Like, most of our cities and counties are not ready for the blackout, the earthquake, the storm, whatever's coming. Like, they're not, and they're not making sure that low-income people's housing is safe. And they're, thinking about what happened in Texas last winter with the cold. Like, what would it look like if we decided as people in those communities to do deep emergency preparedness, assuming that the government isn't going to show up in a good way? They're probably going to show up in a way that's harmful or really uneven. And then we started to say, well, what would actually prepare us? And I think that, given the conditions we're facing right now, the kinds of crises that are happening in all of our communities, from economic crisis to ecological crisis, we need to kind of be doing that. And I think COVID has brought a lot more people into that kind of activity.
I want to circle back to that for a moment in terms of like that role of government in a few. But when you look back in recent history, I mean, I guess as you were saying, about the breakfast and Black Panthers and that notion where it destigmatizes and reorients the understanding of why someone's in a position of needing to get a breakfast for their kids or for themselves. Are there major systemic failures over the past, 15, 20 years that you see that were missed opportunities where we didn't have mutual aid, which could have really, both from a material standpoint, but also in terms of a standpoint of a broader understanding that this is a systemic problem, as opposed to like, oh, I made, whatever. I should have taken that job way back when, and I'd have breakfast now. I mean, is there any that stand out to you?
You're talking missed opportunities for mutual aid responses. What I would say about that is that most often mutual aid responses happen at a very local level, because that's often where disaster happens. So I think the reason the idea of mutual aid has gone mainstream this past year is because COVID is kind of one of these rare disasters that happened everywhere at once, not evenly, but still, right? It's like the whole world had to deal with this. So the whole world was doing mutual aid. So journalists were like, wow, let's talk about this thing everyone's doing. It's really interesting. Whereas at every sort of site, you will see mutual aid popping up with every fire and hurricane. And the amount and capacity and depth of mutual aid people are able to practice often relates to like how deeply they already had community ties. Have they been doing baseline mutual aid already before the big storm or fire? So that's part of, what I'm really talking about is how can we sustain mutual aid efforts so that when we respond, we don't, burn out, or that also, like, we need a lot of people doing mutual aid because there's a lot of people in crisis. And so how do we have mutual aid projects that are capable of responding at the kind of quantity of the need? And I think this has been visible during COVID. So if I think about missed opportunities, I guess I think that mutual aid is always there. If you look at any disaster, it's there. If you look at any point of crisis, including the ongoing kinds of crises, like living in the most imprisoned country in the world, there's just so much mutual aid towards prisoners, towards their families. There's mutual aid everywhere where there is crisis. But we do live in a society that has pushed us intensely towards isolation. And I think that's worsened in the last, especially with the age of the internet. More people live alone, more people don't have live connections to neighbors or in their communities, and people are suffering a lot because of that. So that makes it harder to do mutual aid if people don't know anybody and people are moving a lot for jobs, like people are disconnected in a certain way. And so then your only safety net becomes 911, that's kind of the result of that. And I think also, that level of trained passivity, like someone else should come and save us, like that is really convenient to a system that doesn't want people super activated and asking questions with each other and saying things should be different. So I think that's like a pretty big historical arc. And I would say that comes after 1960s and 70s is a high point of mutual aid in, think about like all the feminist health clinics. I mean, just so many, there was both bold, revolutionary action happening and just tons of community mutual aid at all the flashpoints in the anti-war movement, the anti-racist movements, feminist movements, et cetera, gay rights, et cetera. But then I think you see a pretty big backlash in the 80s. You see the Reagan administration, you see this, you see a new narrative and a new set of really dire economic conditions that we're still living under from the kinds of economic policies that were put in place that cause people to be more isolated, to have to work longer for less money, to have a harder time engaging in community work because they're barely getting by. And I think that we've been living off that. And now we're at this new peak where people are like, oh my God, disasters are abounding. We have to have each other's backs. And the system looks less legitimate because it's not meeting people's basic needs in such an obvious, painful way, kind of no matter who's president. And so I think we're seeing a new sweep of both bold resistance and mutual aid to meet these crisis conditions.
Having lived through the 80s, the ethos was very individualistic. Greed is good was not presented really with that much irony at that time, I should say. So let's just turn just briefly to, because a big portion of your book is also a how-to manual. I mean, it is for people who are going to engage in mutual aid and some of the major pitfalls. The leadership aspect of it. You harken back to the Black Panthers as to some problematic leadership issues that they had, or at least the hierarchies or the mechanism. Talk a little bit about some of the pitfalls that people should be aware of as they engage in mutual aid.
Yeah. I mean, I think that a major concern is that we live in a culture that's based in hierarchy and where people go to jobs and have to either be like, try to be the boss of someone or like just kind of numb out and get bossed around. Like, and just, can I get by? Can I just do what this person says I have to do? And so we don't get very good at practicing the skills of being in a participatory space where everyone's a volunteer and you really want to have the wisdom of the group determine what we're going to do together. We don't just want to like steamroll other people and be like, my way or the highway, because then they'll just leave and stop participating. So we need a really different like way of being together than the things we've learned at spaces like schools, often families and jobs. And so that's a really big piece. How do we understand leadership that produces mutuality and lots of participation from everybody versus leadership that produces like my concentrated power or yours, and gets everybody else to kind of like go along. And that, I think what I talk about is how regarding the Black Panthers and other groups in the 60s and 70s, that there was a really popular framework then of a certain kind of really hierarchical way of organizing groups. And there's a lot of downfalls to that. One, it often leads to people like to some degree or another abusing their power or just like not having the best idea, but their idea is the way it has to be because we've put them in charge. So that can be really hard. And that can mean people leave when they disagree and there can be really big splits. Also, there's a long history of law enforcement infiltration of our social movements that's still going on today. And it was very intensely targeted at the Black liberation movement in the 60s and 70s. And so if you have this very clear set of like who's in charge, you can either take those people down through assassination or arrest, or you can infiltrate and get one of your people in there. And the FBI did that a lot in that period. And so it's our groups are much more resilient and responsive if lots of people know how everything works and are deciding things together. Because then if something happens to any one person, the group still goes on and one person can't sell out or be bought off in some way to do something that's not aligned with the group, which is also a problem in terms of our like nonprofit world, in which, the philanthropist will pick off a leader and be like, we're going to make you our darling. And then now you're going to get paid and you're going to come work at the county or the city level. And then that person is like, it becomes very hard and confusing for other people in the movement. Like, is that person still our leader? Or they now belong to the kind of our opponents, So ultimately the idea of having groups in which a lot of people are participating in decision making, and you do that in really thoughtful ways, which I kind of lay out methods for in the book based on things that have worked for lots of groups, allows more people to participate meaningfully and become really highly skilled at doing this, because we're all going to be, the rest of our lives are going to be full of disasters. So we're going to need to be responsive to a lot of different conditions. So we might be in a group to get today together about supporting people in our local jail, and tomorrow we might be in a different formation that's about people struggling with homelessness, and we also might be responding to the earthquake that's coming in a few years. So we want as many people as possible, as skilled up as possible, to be in groups together, treat each other well, make decisions together, not try to be the boss of everything, and actually like move with group wisdom. And I think there's a lot of very feminist models for that. And in general, there's just a ton of global work that has showed us what those models are and work in the US. And I think more mutual aid groups have gone towards those like flat or horizontal instead of those hierarchical models over the years, because they're more sustainable.
We got a question actually from a listener that I think works in well. This is from Chairman Meow. The greatest obstacles to carrying out mutual aid, at least in my neck of the woods, are all the technocratic and legal barriers between us, the volunteers, and the ability to move money and resources around to the people who actually need help. Setting up the right kind of 501c, figuring out how to decentralize banking, disentangling ourselves from profitable ventures. It's a mess. Collective action is fundamentally incompatible with neoliberal capitalism. I mean, how do you deal with that? Because there isn't, if I want to go and, start a pajama company, there's a whole roadmap that is well tread, pajama company, but where I can go on these endeavors, but in an endeavor that involves like redistributing wealth to people who need it, it's very complicated because our system's not set up for that. How do people get around that?
Yeah, I think first I just want to, if your listeners are interested in this, I recently did a webinar with a tax law professor about this that people can find. It's called like Handling Money for Mutual Aid Groups, and the video's out there. And we made a little chart of like how to think about the pros and cons of different models. Like, yes, we want to get a 501c3, or no, we don't. Yes, we want to be fiscally sponsored by another org, or no, we don't. Like, what are the pros and cons of each model? The basics is this is a really big issue facing a lot of groups right now, because a lot of groups gave out tons of money in 2020, groups that people who'd never done this before. And then maybe they did it through Venmo or PayPal. And then suddenly they got a tax statement and they were like, oh my gosh, we took in all this money. And now whoever's name was on that account is being expected to pay 20 or 30% taxes on that. And they didn't keep that money for that, right? So that's been a problem that's often happened to mutual aid groups over the years. And I think we're seeing it at a big scale right now because of how much money moved in the last year. And that's why we did the webinar. I mean, I think that there's a lot of different ways people deal with that. One is to, so some groups think it's worth it to get a 501c3 status and be able to take in money as a nonprofit, but then you have like the surveillance by the government. You have to file a 990 form every year. You end up with, somebody has to be literate in all of that. And lots of us just aren't, or lots of people aren't. Some groups decide to just do everything more informally. I mean, a lot of groups don't really move that much money. Like some groups move a lot of money, but a lot of groups are moving food or just like, childcare, things that aren't going to be taxed in that same way. Some groups, working on things like if we give you the money by check or cash, it's not traceable in the same way. So can we get, if we're doing something locally, can we gather it without going through Venmo or PayPal? I think that, it's like these rules are designed to make people not share, just to be real. They're designed, it's part of the system. And so we do have to be savvy about it. And also it doesn't have to be a total block or obstacle, right? We can also do other things like, is it that you need an air conditioner? Can I buy you the air conditioner instead of sending it to someone's, Venmo? I think that people, depending on whether you're working at a regional scale or a very local scale in a neighborhood, people have a lot of workarounds. And also then sometimes you just are like, oh no, someone's stuck with a tax bill. We have to raise money for it. And it's okay that we have to do that because we don't want someone to be punished for having done this beautiful work. And so I think that I just appreciate the question because it's good to notice that these systems are literally set up to benefit the richest people and to really make it hard for ordinary people to share stuff with each other. But it's not impossible.
I mean, I guess in that respect, just even organizing to do mutual aid fulfills that, I guess, part of the mission of mutual aid in terms of, being able to see the structures that are set up and the political choices that are made in the context of those structures. All right. So lastly, let me ask you this: your critique of the state, right, is that many of these issues are a function of the state's failures. This is as opposed to a right-wing critique, which would be like, we don't even want the state to try, right? Like, we're just going to, this is going to be it. And we would like to freeze everything right now. We happen to have the land, the power, and this and that. So now's a good time to sort of like, let's have no government intervention. How much of this, so what does, I guess maybe this is a two-part question, but one is where does like is reform of the government response to these things part of this programmatically, or is that like part of the journey to get to another place? And then the second part of that question is like, much of this is predicated on the failure of society to do what it should be. What does this look like in success? Like, if the context was success, would we have mutual aid, or is that just going to be like not a thing anymore? It's just like the way that we live our lives.
So I would just say too, I want to add to your critique of the right that the right also, they don't want a small state. They just want all the money going to police, military, right? They actually love a huge state. Right. That's a security state, which makes
protect their property. Right.
Yeah. So they're like, they love the state, it made them. But they think they don't. Yeah. So I think that it's important to distinguish my critique from like a libertarian, like right-wing libertarian critique, because mine is just kind of like realism. Like, okay, the US government, which is the one I live under, is like, has always been organized by white supremacy and colonialism. It has always, whatever it's done disaster or poor relief, it's given it out in a racist and sexist way. Like, I would be silly as a scholar of, the history of welfare to think that that's about to change. And these disasters are upon us. And so this is how we get by. And I think, yes, I want a society that's run by mutual aid instead of run by concentrated elite power. So what I'm really thinking about here is like, rather than what we have as what the US government is like this thing that can redistribute. It helps extraction happen to the wealthiest people. That's its job. It's an extraction machine. And it does that through taxation to some degree, but it does it through like all kinds of ways of organizing so that everyone has to get their life through corporations and through we have to get our energy through that. We have to get everything through these systems that we know are unjust and unsustainable, like our food system and our energy system, et cetera. And so what we want to do is replace those systems that are terrible, that rely on keeping millions of people in cages, that, we want to replace that with things that we think actually work in our communities and that are locally based and participatory and deeply networked with each other and in solidarity. So that's what like success looks like to me. Success would not look like, if some people's vision of success would be that like we'd have a really nice mommy daddy taking care of us state that would give us everything with us having to just get to just passively, and that to me, that sounds like authoritarian control, right? It sounds like I know that whatever they would give out would have certain people in mind and not others, because that's how it's always been, especially with racism in the US, right? So what I'm interested in is like deep local wisdom and participation, so that there wouldn't be concentration of wealth, because people would actually be co-stewarding things like land, water, food systems, and we would do it in ways that weren't destroying the earth and making like workers sick and all of that. So it's really a vision of deeply participatory, non-passive engagement with the basic things that meet our survival needs, and it feels essential on an ecological level. And also, it's about people actually having collective control over their lives, over which people have not had in particular communities of color and Native communities in the US. It's a little bit abstract, but I think what I'm trying to say is like, for me, this is about a realism around the limits of our state form and what kind of white supremacist state the US is and how it's been about extraction. And so just stopping like, and along the way, we get concessions, right? The other thing I'll say is like, when movements rise up, there are concessions from the state. We should celebrate those as indications that we built power and had some victory, but they're always insufficient, right? The PPP loans don't meet Black businesses, right? Or we know they're all, the concessions of relief are always really insufficient. So we can say, great, there were concessions. That's a sign that we're building power. We're not going to go back to sleep now. We're going to keep building and actually try to build something that we think can be livable, which we're not at yet.
The book is Mutual Aid, Building Solidarity During This Crisis and the Next. Dean Spade, thank you so much for your time today. We will put a link to your book at majority.fm. Really appreciate you telling us about it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, folks, going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this. So there you have it. That book, incidentally, is both. There's some history of mutual aid in there. There's the theory, and a how-to. And I don't know. We had stuff going in our just in our apartment building. For folks, inviting older folks who couldn't necessarily go to the supermarket and purchasing them food and whatnot. This is one of those, sort of projects that that are helpful along the way. That to a vision. I have some skepticism about sort of the without sort of like a state existing on some level, but that's everything along the way that is expressed in that context is helpful to society and diminishes, hopefully, the bad stuff that you get along with a state that has been captured or was established for some rather narrow interests.
Yeah, I think by, creating or incentivizing and just encouraging different projects that are going to reduce atomization in our communities, because that's, I think, an under-discussed problem, that project is moving us in the right direction, as you say.
Yeah, and it's not just the atomization; it is the lack of power that comes with that atomization and pushback. But different era. We are no longer, fortunately, in the 80s, and in the wake of the 80s, in the 90s, and then in the aughts, as it were. So hopefully we will see more of this, and we will see in those moments where we do have sort of crises, or whether they are acute or sort of rolling, we'll have a broader response that will fill that vacuum before moneyed interests do. All right, folks, that's it for us today. We will see you tomorrow if you are joining us on Peacock. And for those of you who are not, which is probably a lot more of you, we're going to head into the fun half of the program. Joining us today on the show will be Nomiki Konst of the Nomiki Konst Show. She will be joining us. Just a reminder, it's your support that keeps this program going. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Matt Lack.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, maybe we don't have Nomiki today. Is that possible? I hope she's okay. Well, Matt, why don't you tell us what's happening in the Matt Leckian universe?
So tonight I will be with my Twitch stream. I went out last night to celebrating my girlfriend getting accepted into nursing school. So I did not Twitch stream last night. But I will do it tonight.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wait. She didn't want to Twitch stream to celebrate that she got into nursing school?
No, it turns out she'd rather go out on the town. I thought that was weird too, but I don't
That's
know.
weird.
COVID's making everyone act in just all sorts of weird ways. So.
Yeah.
Did you, when she said, Matt, I want to go out on town, I don't want to watch you do a Twitch stream, did you say like, I feel like I don't even know you anymore?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you haven't seen me play Rocket League in a while, so.
Right.
But we went bowling actually, so it was fun.
Anyway, no way.
Yeah, it's great. But tonight, yeah, I'll do a twitch.tv/literary hangover. I'll probably play Rocket League.
There are some good bowling places in Brooklyn. I'm trying to remember, like, I just like don't. I've been to a few of them out here, and I just like there are divey ones. There are ones that are bigger, and I can't remember their names. Like I can't believe that society existed before this time.
Well, there's Brooklyn Bowl, which is a concert venue and sort of like fancy one. They've got locations across the country.
And my friend used to work there. Yeah.
Oh, nice. And then you got
the Gutter. The Gutter.
Is,
yes, that's a good place.
Where's that?
Has a few
yes.
Locations around New York.
I still, Matt, am disappointed that you didn't put up more of a fight. Like, this is the way that I celebrate, and I want to celebrate this.
I mean, to be fair, I got to watch basketball while bowling because they had the game projected right over the lane. So I was watching playoffs and stuff. So I wasn't exactly entirely for her.
Okay, well, there you go. I'm glad to see that.
Who won, though? I mean, did your gaming prowess translate to the bowling lanes?
Oh, I'm a good bowler. I got over 100 a couple times.
There you go.
Pretty close every time. So.
All right. Well, really?
Yeah.
Well, you've also just got to have, like, when you have to have power through your legs when you're following through too. So
he's got long arms. It's like he doesn't have to bend, and it just.
Yeah, I can basically reach down the lane.
Rolls right off. It's not fair. Where's Nomi? Let's bring her in.
Oh, here she is. There she is.
I don't see her. Oh, there she is. We're just sitting here looking at Nomi's picture. Nomi.
Hang on. This happened so fast, guys. Wait.
Let's see. What else we got to go? There we go.
You got to give me a second.
All right.
I just hear Nomi as soon as I'm like, hi.
Hi. Where are you? Where are you located?
I am
in a doctor's office.
I know. I'm in a hotel room just for today. And then I moved to a new location in San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Okay,
where I'm
there you
still
go.
filming this documentary, and I will be for the rest of my life.
There you go. Well, it's nice to have a project that lasts your entire life.
As long as the money's flowing in, that's all I care about.
Nomi, what's happening with your show today?
We have Akayla Lacey on today talking about her article in The Intercept saying that Congress misses symbolic deadline for police reform. Of course, this is the anniversary of George Floyd's murder. And then later in the show, we have our amazing panel of, let me look at it just to make sure it's confirmed, because sometimes this stuff isn't confirmed by the time I'm on the show. Yes, we do have Ben Dixon and Simon Rode on, which is awesome, because who's better than Ben Dixon and Simon Rode? Many people.
Maybe Akayla Lacey. That's about it.
Well, she's.
Folks can check that out at youtube.com/The Nomi Key Show.
Oh, look at you. Is it because the Fox News guy said my name wrong that now suddenly you've been embarrassed to say my name perfectly?
No, it's just that was just like, I don't know. It's really just like roulette. It's just like
no, but you've been more consistent recently, I think.
Have I?
Those long limbs.
I've been
as long as he doesn't have to think.
Pronunciation
really
roulette.
Trying to think about it. I'm like the Chuck Knobloch of saying your name.
You even said Liz Cheney on the show the other day.
Yeah, Sam's got, you got the yips or whatever they're called.
I don't get that joke. What's the joke?
Chuck Knobloch's the second.
Is this a sports thing?
No, I got it. Chuck Knobloch's the second baseman for the Twins, and then you go to the Yankees. And he like stopped being able to make the throw from second to first base. He just couldn't make it
from second base to first base. It was
it's
really
a mental
tragic.
thing.
Yeah. But he just choked. He's just psyched himself out, and he couldn't throw the ball there. It would just like throw it over the head or throw it in the dirt. I mean, it's not a very long throw.
Yeah, it's not a hard throw.
Besides the pitcher, probably the shortest throw to first that you can make. I mean, but he just couldn't do it. All right.
The perfect analogy for my name.
For my ability to say
for your abilities, yeah. But okay, that's fair enough.
Fair enough. We will see you in the fun half, ladies and gentlemen.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dannerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males...
Psych. Fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bang. A hell of a lot of bang. A hell of a lot of bang. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bang. A hell of a lot of bang.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
One back.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. It is the fun half. Are we going to have some fun. Hold on. Let me get my sound sheet out. Let's start off with a couple of IMs. Should we take some calls today or what? Champagne Comunista. Did you hear that Katie Porter endorsed Nina Turner? Hello? Yes. Somebody?
I did not, but yay.
That's great. Let's go down here to the bottom here. Fart. Okay. Sam,
I love that.
Yes. Why didn't Air America thrive? Was it talent's fault or leadership? It was definitively
Sam's fault.
My fault. But
Ron Hardbaum's fault.
Sorry. It was leadership. I mean, it was also the volatility of the leadership. We had 5 owners and 6 CEOs over the course of 5 or 6 years. That's a lot of turnover. And and they were all idiots, all of them, in their own unique, special way. Management was garbage too. Like they didn't understand. It was all radio people, and radio people were not terribly savvy. The last guy that we had said to me, "We are going to create the best, the most liberal website." This is a guy, incidentally, who contributed to Mitt Romney. "We're going to contribute the most liberal website. We're going to beat HuffPo, and we're going to have an independent radio station." And I was like, wow, man, I got to hand it to you. You are probably the first person in decades to attempt to do a completely horizontal business plan. And I said, you should open up a shoe store and refuse to advertise on either one of your other properties. And he just looked at me, and I was like, the idea, he told me the story. He said, when I worked at, WXYZ, whatever it was, some radio station in Washington, he goes, we had a writer, sports writer from the Washington Post who would never talk about on the radio the article he had written. And I was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. You both didn't get your money's worth out of that guy. Like he thought that they had to be sequestered as opposed to like integrated.
What year was this?
This was 2010. He was a moron. And he's now like, he's still doing well. The last time I saw him was at like some like charity thing, the one charity thing, like luncheon type of thing I had gone to that was associated with radio. I can't remember what it was. I feel like somehow Richard Kind was involved in it, but he was there. I ran into him and he looked at me and he goes, "Are you thriving, Sam?" And I just said, "Excuse me?"
What does that mean?
It was just his way of just being like, and then he said, like, I heard, this was years and years ago. And he goes, I heard that you brought my name up at a panel at Netroots. And I said, oh, yes. No, I totally trashed you. And I said, that was the moment where I felt the most thrivey. And that was it.
Are you, who was, you have to say
wait,
you
now. Said that? You said that to his face.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, he knew I hated him. And he just like, the whole culture is like, we pretend like you don't hate each other. And I'm like, no, I don't do that.
I know. I admire that. It's like, that's something you do just casually. And I would never in my life say something like that to somebody to their face.
That's always been my a huge liability, is that like, it's really important to me that when I have an issue with someone that they know it. And that's not an attribute that helps in life. That is not a good attribute.
Right.
Really,
I mean, but it could just be like
that.
It could be me where I like keep it in or like talk to my like friends behind that person's back, or then I'm passive aggressive. At least you get it out of the way.
Yeah, no, I don't know how to be passive aggressive. I only know how to be aggressive or aggressive.
I'm passive aggressive with Sam. Like, do you wanna open the window?
Yeah.
Do you wanna join the Zoom call?
I will tell you one story about this guy. When they
Who
canceled,
is it? You're killing me. I need to know who it is. You've already said it publicly. Just say it now. 99% of the people watching won't know who it is, but I might, and that's what matters right now.
Oh no, you don't know who it is.
No.
Bennett Zier.
Bennett. Bennett-like.
This is the best part. When Marin and I were canceled, I was in the office. He called Brendan McDonald, who was our producer, down and said, told him they were canceled. Brendan came down and said to Mark, Bennett wants to see you. And Mark came back and I'm like, did Bennett say he wants to see me? And Mark was like, no. And I said, oh, okay. And so I got up and I walked out and went into his office. I said, Mark said you want to see me? And I made him give the whole spiel. And I went on. I said, that was where that conversation about the we're going to have the most independent. And he goes, and he says, I just laid into him. He's like, there were 5 decisions that were made before I got here that made it impossible. And he had already planned this all out, like his excuses. And then he said, like, the economy is really hurting our revenue. And I said, never mind revenue. You've managed to come in here and cut market share by 80%. That has nothing to do with forget the revenue. You've cut market share by 80%. Like, think about that. You really needed to work at that, man. Congratulations. And then he's like, there are 5 decisions that were made that blah, blah, blah. So that was that. All right.
That's what you learn in business school. How to ruin a business. But Sam, can you imagine when I was
school. He was just a guy who put on like a Rolex and came in and like, people who had no ideas would just completely fall for that. That's all.
So it's so interesting you say this because at SiriusXM, like 6 years later, when I was there, they hired radio people, like terrestrial radio people, to do our show. And SiriusXM, you don't know what your ratings are, although internally they do, I'm sure, but they just never tell you. And they wanted to do a podcast. And I sat in this conference room, and someday I'll write about this in depth because it was the most horrifying experience of my life, where this is right after the convention, not the most horrifying. Unfortunately, there's many more, but one of the most one of those moments where like, I'm a woman in business and I'm sitting in a boardroom with 35 men telling me how to be a host. So what had happened was I had been at the 2016 convention, and there was a photo of me protesting the war general on stage, standing up with a flag over my mouth. And they put the flag up and they put this picture up and they said, we're going to cut your show if you don't apologize for that.
Really? Uh-huh. Oh, geez. And what did you say?
And I also recorded it because I'm not an effing idiot. So I was like, this is going to come
on the show.
This is going to come in handy someday. It was, and they were all like nitpicking, like, you need to fix your microphone when you do this. You need to do that. And I was just like, do men go through this? And it was being on the left and being a woman and whatever. But they just promoted our show and they said, you can't act like this. So John Kerry's our Secretary of State. He protested a war. Why am I not allowed to protest a war?
Right.
Like, go F yourself. Anyways, it was terrestrial radio people. That's the point.
Oh, yeah.
They're the worst.
I got a call. All right. Well, one more story and then we'll get on with the show. I got a call from one of the executives at Air Market. This was 5 years earlier in the run up to the 2004 RNC. And the guy calls me, he's in a different office, and he calls me and he goes, hey, and incidentally, I recorded every single phone call when I worked there. I had like one of those Radio Shack things that you stick onto the receiver. That's just what I did. I was doing all these prank phone calls, and I would record everything. And because Lenny Bruce used to do that. He had a briefcase that he would carry around that had a recording device. And so I was just convinced that I should be recording everything. And the guy calls and he says, listen, I just want to make sure that you and Janine are aware that you cannot promote violence at the RNC. And I was like, oh, okay. What's this about? He goes, well, I just want to, give you a heads up. And I was like, is this about the whole Molotov cocktail thing? And he's like, what? And I said, look, we were not telling people to throw them. We were just describing how you make them. That's different. We weren't in any way encouraging anybody throwing them. He's like, what? You can't do that. And I'm like, well, look, I mean, people ask the question and we just want to be able to be there with the answers. And so we answered, and he just like lost it. I'm just laughing. He didn't say anything about it, but it was just like, these people were just not the sharpest tacks. Let's see. You said on air a few shows ago that you would respond to me, my email. Any progress on that front? Just checking in. Thanks so much for doing such amazing shows. Well, we're not going to respond to it. I get the list of suggestions that you had, and we're going to look into them. Some of them we've had on the show in the past, but we appreciate it. I can't respond to every email, believe me. Jessica Fove Pup.
Sam, you haven't responded to my email.
What's that? I haven't even responded to nobody's. Duck on duck crime goes up every time I toss them scraps of bread. I'm not sure what that's about, but how are you feeling? Nerd Cheetah. Maybe it's the lighting, but you looked a little rough yesterday. Is Biden actually backing away from promises on minimum wage and public option and now student loan forgiveness? Can I start saying they haven't earned my vote and the Democrats lose on purpose again? Or should I just wait for them to try a little harder? How long should I wait pretending they're inept, do you think? Also, does that Hello Tushy do a blow dry or just a wash? First question last, just a wash. Well, I mean, I would wait until maybe, there's an election to assess, have they fulfilled the promises that they should? I would say the jury is still out. I do think, let's talk about this, Nomi. We are at the point where the infrastructure talks are about to break down. They probably have already, but this is all just sort of kabuki. And I think to a certain extent, it was always kabuki. A week ago, Schumer was already talking to the parliamentarian about reconciliation. They knew this wasn't going anywhere. I'm sure they've already been talking about ideas in committees. If they haven't, then it's a complete malpractice. But I get the sense that they are aware this is going this way. They have done all the things that they're doing. They're going to end up passing this infrastructure bill, at least the first tranche, through reconciliation. It seems to me they may, they're going to figure out what the tax implications are. They may not tax in the way that I want them to. They may end up dropping that if they can figure out the way to get through that. But then what? I mean, is that your sense of what's going to happen over the next, let's say, I don't know, 3 to 6 weeks?
That all energy is going to be on infrastructure?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I think that's what, someone asked me the same question on our show last week, that, basically, like, why isn't Biden after a pandemic, why isn't Biden putting forward at least the public option? I was like, because he's got one big project. It's very hard to do these. The fact we have to explain this is kind of ridiculous. How many fights can you take on at once? I would have probably not gone with infrastructure first, but I don't know. Yeah, I think we're going to be consumed with this for the next 6 to 8 weeks, maybe more. Because Congress goes on break in August, and then there's a break in June.
I think they got to finish this
right?
before the debt ceiling.
The House is already in recess.
They're already in recess, right?
They
are.
I think they got to finish this before they got to finish this, within July. I mean, look, the reconciliation process is only going to take 3 to 6 weeks, it seems to me. And they're going to enter into it next week. They're going to have all of June, half of July. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to pass something by mid-July. We'll see what it is. Yeah. And then the debt ceiling, I think, is going to be where you see the filibuster showdown. And then, then it becomes what it should have been all along. We're negotiating with Manchin. We're negotiating with Sinema. We're negotiating with Mark Kelly and Mark Warner, for that matter. Mm-hmm. And we're leaning on them and stuff like that. And I'm talking about from the Biden administration's perspective. Yeah.
And then what's next? What do you think that, what's next? What's the next big thing that they're going to put on the table?
Well, I think that if they go through the debt ceiling and they have to jettison the filibuster to do so, then I think what they will do will be voting rights, and they will attempt to do the PRO Act. And then I think they will punt the second tranche of infrastructure, which is the one that has, and I don't know how many, they may break those up, right? Because I don't know how much of that is, would fit under reconciliation, but I think some of that's what they'll do. They have at least one more reconciliation bill before 2022.
But punting that, don't they have a deadline? And I'm blanking on when the cliff is for the child tax credit.
That's in I think that's in September.
So that's the furthest they can punt, I would imagine, because the second,
well, you don't necessarily, if you've gotten rid of the filibuster by August because of the debt ceiling, then it opens up a lot of things.
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna.
Well, I mean, this is all speculation. I mean, yeah. If they don't, there's very little is going to happen. I mean, that's just the bottom line. very little is going to happen. Will Biden at that point? I mean, look, let's put it this way. If it were Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, I have no doubt they would have come in and done a bunch of things through executive order, because they would have also known at least Bernie was not even going to get Manchin for half this stuff. I mean, I don't even know if they would have been able to do the
other senators who just to protect themselves, and congressional members, would have pulled a Manchin. I mean, who knows? That's the reality of if Bernie were elected, is you'd have more senators creeping to the middle.
That's right. They would be harder. There's not enough room for them to move towards Sanders. But you would have seen Sanders do something like $50,000 debt relief. Students, I'm signing the bill. I'm doing the executive order. I think Warren would have obviously done that too. I think actually Warren would have used that authority even more than Bernie, because I think that was sort of like, that's in her wheelhouse, I think. But I think from Biden's perspective, the best we can hope for, and I don't know if he's going to do this, but I would imagine the sequencing is going to be different. He's going to run out of legislative options before he does any of this stuff unilaterally. And even then, he may not do it. But it really is, because for him, it's just, purely a political calculation. If he can get a bunch of stuff done legislatively and feels like he doesn't need to do this stuff unilaterally or do the stuff that's left over, he won't do it. He won't do it. That's just the bottom line. So here is Jen Psaki being questioned about whether anything has changed in policing since the Floyd death, really the killing. And here is her take.
Given where things are here in Washington with police reform, has anything actually changed since Mr. Floyd was killed as it relates to policing and Black and brown people in this country?
Well, let me first say that the president is still very much hopeful that he will be able to sign the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act into law. And we are, of course, very closely engaged with the negotiators, while also leaving them room to work. And just on Friday, the president spoke with Senator Booker. We've also seen that Senator Scott has publicly said that the key for us is to keep making progress, and we're going to keep supporting those efforts. I would say it's hard for me to assess from here, community to community, where we have seen progress made. Certainly, the death of George Floyd, the tragic death of George Floyd, has unfortunately elevated into the public eye, thanks to the reporting from many of you, the need to put reforms into place, the need to rebuild trust in communities, and we're certainly hopeful that that activism, that engagement will help move this legislation across the finish line.
This George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is so weak that there's part of me that hopes it doesn't even pass, because then they're going to throw their hands up and say, "Oh, we did it." That was Pelosi's posture after the sentencing and not the sentencing, but the conviction of Derek Chauvin, which was that, fixed it, solved it, our PR disaster is done. It's over with, right? We've been able to just move past having to deal with our base on this. The Justice and Policing Act bans chokeholds on a federal level, bans cardiac holds, whatever the case may be, improves training for community programs, bans no-knock warrants in federal drug cases, and they're going to pick at it. The qualified immunity part's not going to make it through. And so part of this is it's too strong to say I don't want it to pass, but in the long term, they're going to treat this as some sort of silver bullet when obviously it's not.
But here's the thing, it's not going away. The crises are not going away. So they can pass this and it will make a minimal difference, but what's going to happen is people are still going to get killed, police are not going to be held accountable, and the movements are going to escalate. And there's going to be more calls. If it's not going to happen at the federal level, then guess what? The calls are going to be at the city level, as they already are. So I think, let them pass it and let them see that they're not doing jack shit.
I think ultimately the biggest thing that the federal government can do is inhibit qualified immunity to get that idea out there that there is no qualified immunity on a federal level, and so that people on cities and state levels start to take that up. But also, I think it's got to be we're just not giving money for X, Y, and Z for police departments. Like, we're no longer, old military equipment. That thing's over. We're, they're selling that stuff like 3 times over, right? And it's just unbelievable. I mean, that's the problem, is that, like, you've got the Defense Department budget, which is really sort of subsidizing the cop thing. And sending that stuff to cops actually justifies the Pentagon budget more too.
Well, it feeds itself.
So that's exactly.
And Obama stopped it a little, but then Trump, of course, I don't even know what Trump's position.
That's got to be. I mean, there needs to be a lot less equipment going to these police departments, because none of the equipment is never used in the equipment is all like on the control side. There's no I'm okay with like investigative devices that will help you solve a murder, but all the devices that they get are all control, right? It's vehicles for control, like riot control or police
going to catch a murder in my tank.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or my electric dog, my dog robot is going to capture a murder. It's not happening. It's all control stuff. And then a lot of this has to happen on the local level. I mean, the value of it happening on the federal level is just that it gives a little bit more leverage to say, we need to do this on the local level. It begins to sort of like, it is one more argument of what you can do on a local level. That's all.
They're selling scraps. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also just to point out too, like, to bring it back to Jen Psaki, I mean, Brendan just messaged us this, the passivity with which she talks about their action or lack of action on this front, or Biden's leadership to actually strong arm or attempt to make this a priority to get things through. I mean, I'm called back to that leaked, Zoom call or whatever that Ryan Grimm got a hold of at The Intercept, in which Biden was essentially telling civil rights leaders and anti-police brutality activists to calm down and essentially trust him. But why? They're not showing any forward, aggressive leadership on this front. They just want the PR to improve for the Democratic Party in this area. That's literally the extent of Biden's leadership here. And I mean, like, part of it is pretty sickening, to be honest.
Well, let's remember in that leaked video what Joe Biden said to those leaders. He said, "I'm the only white boy who did it," in reference to his actions in the 60s and 70s.
Right.
It's I've been thinking a lot in the last couple of days about just, it's been a year, right, since George Floyd and the largest uprising, and what is it going to take do movements just operate differently now? I mean, there is change. There's a cultural change that's definitely happening, and aided by social media, and more people have showed up on the streets in the last year in response to George Floyd and so many murders. But the power, like the way that we move the levers of power, I just don't feel like we're talking about that enough. Like, these things are not doing enough legislatively, but they are culturally, and it does brush up against the legislative process, but not in a way that happened in the 60s. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's just, there's a disconnect. I don't know if movements aren't being aggressive enough, violent enough, frankly. I'm not advocating for that, but I'm saying that as an observation. There's just something missing from is it just the neoliberal experiment? It's
also the Republican Party. I mean, like the Democrats aren't, like, without filibuster reform, so it's, I guess, the Democrats who won't reform the filibuster plus the Republican Party. Republican Party, it's not going to be like the 60s where they go, oh, we have to do this so that we can leverage this in the future. They just say no to everything.
But at the city level, I mean, there's no excuse at the city level when every single city in America is controlled by Democrats for the most part, and major city, at least, or mid-level city. Or, I mean, even with Joe Biden, he has the power of the pen. If this moment does not create change, at least at the city level, I mean, Mayor de Blasio's daughter was doxxed by the NYPD, by the union, the police union. If that doesn't push you, then what is going to push? What is going on?
Well,
what is it going to take?
I think it's going to take a more sustained, protest, and more widespread. And now is just like a difficult. Well, I mean.
The streets of New York have been engulfed in protests for the last 10 years when it comes to Black lives. Seriously. I mean, regular protests, shutting down. What is it going to take? People are not exhausted. They're just more angry. So if protests are only just changing the culture, which is great, and that is a way of pushing the levers of power, but it's not an immediate. It's like you don't know when the moment's going to happen, but then it happens because of XYZ thing that happens.
Right. Well, I don't know. I mean, look, there are pressure points. There's some very good district attorneys who are running that I just don't think there is a one answer to this. I think it is having, some electeds who are allied to what folks on the street are protesting. I think it's, the broader culture changing. I think it's just a combination of all those things. I just don't think that it's just going to happen overnight. But I think you keep pressuring. I mean, the difference, I don't, folks have been on the streets in the same way for 10 years, not in this regard. And not with, we're seeing minimal responses. And the question is, I think that the people behind these minimal responses is like, is this enough to let the air out of the tires a little bit? And if it doesn't let the air out of the tires, they got to do a little more. I mean, that's basically the way it works. The pressure needs to continue to build, but it's also very hard to maintain a rate of increasing pressure over long periods of time. It's a very hard thing to maintain. And so, and particularly on some level, the end of the pandemic is, you also got to sort of how much energy does the end of the pandemic sort of suck out of frustration in the absence of another high profile, situation of police killing. And so I don't know. I think it'll come back around sooner than later. And I think if you get lucky and you have these protests going when you've got someone like a Krasner or a the right DA at the right time, who is able to walk in front of cameras and a microphone and echo what is being said on the streets, that's going to create a tremendous amount of pressure.
Also, if these members of Congress that stand in solidarity with the movement for Black Lives and vocally do, if they're from a city like Los Angeles or New York, pressure your mayor. I mean, that's the thing that I'm not feeling is the other political elements that have the ability to take those risks to pressure the Democratic mayors to actually do something.
I mean, Eric Adams is leading this race, and he's not going to cut the police budget $1, he says. So, in New York, at least. But I mean, there is
But he can feel the fire, though. He's. I'm not saying, listen, I'm not advocating for him, but he'll feel it. He'll feel it.
Oh yeah, but in New York, Tahini Abushi running for DA, that could be a really interesting difference. Having a progressive DA in New York would be a big deal. That's
in
a deal.
Manhattan.
In Manhattan, sorry.
All right, let's turn to some other pressing stuff. Rick Santorum
met his maker.
Has been fired.
I mean, oh wait, that's not right. That sounds
No.
like that's death,
That's
right?
right. No.
He's alive. I mixed it up.
Let me just say this, because Rick Santorum is going to complain that he got fired. The
He
idea
got canceled, you should say. Canceled.
The idea that Rick Santorum got hired in the first place is if you wanted to talk about like what is white privilege mean in practice? It means that like mediocre white guys can have opportunities that non-white guys can't get. Like
It's maintaining the cultural space gerrymander, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And
I love that.
Just the fact that Rick Santorum was anywhere for as long as he has been in the public eye on this network, in and of itself, should almost be criminalized. But it's not.
I mean, okay.
Wait, let's
He's
play
a
this.
senator,
Let's play this
though.
clip.
He's
Let's
not
play
a
this clip.
random guy. He's
Let's
a
play
former
this clip.
senator.
Let's play this clip.
Sick of it, to be honest.
No, I couldn't agree with you more, Sean. In many cases, throughout my entire career, people have been called to be fired for saying this and fired for saying this. And I've always defended their right and say, look, people have a right to their opinion. And by the way, CNN has a right to fire me. If they don't like what I'm saying or what I'm doing, they have a right to fire me. I have no animus at all towards CNN. Like I said, I appreciate the opportunity they gave me. But I think it does show that the left is intolerant. They're worried, I'm sure, that their viewership, which is obviously very left, they were going to pay a price. And the intolerance of the left is really the issue here, and the cancel culture that is flowing from it. And I hear from a lot of liberals, in fact, many CNN contributors who talked to me afterwards, who are very, very concerned about the cancel culture that's now hitting them at CNN.
Well, there's like Kayleigh McEnany, and then Jeff Lord's fired, and you're fired.
Yeah.
I'm sure you did. When was she fired? She's the CNN. She moved to the White House. What is he talking about?
Well, the point is not whether Jeffrey Lord and Rick Santorum were fired because of cancel culture, and then everybody else who gets fired it's not cancel culture. It's just like, well, that's just the rules. Look, bottom line is like this crybaby stuff. It's just ridiculous. I would fire everybody associated with all of these jobs, frankly. Rick Santorum's an idiot. I get he's a former senator. He's still an idiot. He's still a current idiot.
But Jeff Lord, was not somebody who should have had that spot. And they had him on every single segment, and he was nauseating in his rating. And if you're going to play the game of ratings, some of these people don't even rate well. You can get it down to the millisecond. So it was a political strategy. That's what it was. Put him on to represent the stupid right wing next to Ana Navarro, who's the funny right wing.
Look, here's the point. The whole thing is just appealing to your audience. The idea that this is cancel culture when we don't have somebody on who our audience doesn't want to see. I mean, give me a break. It's as if what's going on at CNN. He's not a reporter. He's just sitting there espousing a bad opinion, and he's just paid there like a paid monkey. They can find another person to espouse the same dumb opinions.
Well, I mean, he had that Hannity appearance, locked and loaded, ready to go as soon as CNN pulled the trigger. Man, I'm just consistent with my euphemisms today. But I mean, he really was, I think, ready to just make this case as soon as he knew he'd inevitably be gone from CNN. It really is a win-win for a guy like Santorum. He can have that cushy job, and then when he's eventually ousted because he's a racist, he can leverage that into some sort of, aggrievement posture on Fox News when no one cares about what Rick Santorum has to say on the right. He's not a relevant figure to them, but he used his media job to create another media opportunity, and on the cycle goes.
And he's probably going to resuscitate himself and run for something else and go on Fox News and build his base. Not news, but he'll probably get a contributorship to Fox News and run for, whatever. He'll figure it out or be a point. They don't go away. But I love to let's just play the game of how the right wing resuscitates itself when they're canceled for saying things that are way past the point of norm, and then how the left, Mark Lamont Hill, or I'll even say myself, when I said, no, I will not endorse Hillary Clinton at the convention, I'm a delegate and a surrogate. And they're like, how nice, contract negotiations are over, pulling that from HR at CNN. Real story, this is what happens. So, we don't go out there and say we've been canceled. Sam, you have a million stories like this. It's just, and then where does the left go? They don't have they're not Ben Shapiro. They can't just Ben Shapiro didn't get a contract at Fox. Okay, great. Then he's going to get a Heritage Foundation to fund the Koch brothers to fund his media empire.
Right.
I mean, that's what happens is they have capital, they have resources, they have infrastructure, they have algorithms, they have gender, they have race, all supporting their mission while the left says maybe human rights exist. It was Mark Lamont Hill is a perfect example of this.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Enough.
The right also has Real America's Voice, the water cooler show. And this is a clip of David Brody, who hosted Marjorie Taylor Greene when she first made her analogy between the people's reaction to you when you don't wear a mask to the Nazi regime of forcing Jews to wear a yellow star.
She nailed it.
Here's David Brody trying to backfill on this. And I got news for you, folks. It ain't working. Here's David Brody.
All right, and just point out, I just need to hold on just quickly. I know this is pull it back up. It is the ugliest graphic I've ever seen in my life. And
I was just thinking that before you even said it, I was like, what is that?
It looks like urine, and it's design, but almost by design. And it doesn't kind of match with the color scheme of the studio. And so, wait, this is Newsmax, right?
No, it's Real America's Voice.
Oh, right. Okay, great.
Wait,
Keep going.
I don't even know this one. My favorite is the font, though.
Yeah.
The water cooler definitely looks like urine. All that, but the font is just so beautiful. So
I'll tell you why they do the
Nick
font.
at Night. Nick
at Night, right? Yeah.
They do the font that way to imply that what is happening is comedic, because it's sort of like a funny font.
Right,
like
Gutfeld. Right, the Gutfeld was in the Garfield letters. Yeah,
is what they will cite when they get sued for whatever it is. Ultimately, they get sued for whatever misinformation they put out there. They go, it is a comedy satire product. Oh. You can tell by the font we use on the water cooler. All right, let's play this.
Interesting.
I'm joking.
Media has portrayed Congresswoman Greene's comments inaccurately. First of all, they are saying she was comparing her situation to that of a Holocaust victim. So that's 100% wrong, all right? An honest reading of her comments shows that she was comparing the pre-Holocaust period in Nazi Germany to some aspects of America today. Specifically, she was noting how history has shown us that certain countries and regimes have indeed separated people into second-class citizens. In essence, she was saying that Jews were branded as second-class citizens back then with a gold star. And today, we are also seeing a branding and division of people between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, two classes of people. That was the point she made. Look, she wasn't coming from a place of hate. She was trying to highlight warning signs in today's society and in today's America. The traditional media is not accurately reporting what MTG said. I was criticized heavily this weekend for nodding in agreement to what MTG said and also not following up at the time. Now, sadly, this misrepresentation is totally distorted and intellectually dishonest. I was nodding in agreement at the part when she started talking about the Gold Star treatment in Nazi Germany, because I understood her analogy about people.
Just a reminder, he's saying gold star treatment, not yellow star.
Right.
Different things, right.
Being separated into two classes of people then and now. I nodded because I have been expressing this exact same sentiment on the air for months regarding comparisons to Nazi Germany and how back then you had to show your papers and today you have to show your vaccine passport. Folks, look, it's important
just
to
make
never
it the same
forget that
analogy.
before the Holocaust
Why are
took
using
place, the
one
Nazis forced Jews to wear identifying badges. It was a form of psychological warfare. It was a way of dehumanizing the Jews of Europe.
Yes.
They were made to feel inferior and different from everyone else in society. Some see parallels to that in the divisions today in a COVID-wary America. But of course, the parallels end once the Jews were taken away to concentration camps.
Right,
and I was not nodding in agreement to that, nor was Marjorie Taylor Greene suggesting that.
Well, let me wait a second.
Wait
a second. The parallels don't just end when the Jews go to the concentration camps, the death camps.
Pretty big schism there, right?
That's because the parallels end considerably before then. The difference between saying we're going to demonize you because you're a Jew and we're going to say you need to get vaccinated because there's a pandemic. That's also not, those are not parallels. It's like saying we're not creating a second class of citizens that are to be scorned. In fact,
unvaxxed Americans.
We're not even requiring the unvaccinated to wear a black star, let's say, which would be somewhat parallel insofar as you're telling them to wear a star. But the fact is that this is a health concern. This is the idea that unvaccinated people are, being maligned because they're unvaccinated. They can't help that. They can help that. It's a health
choice.
Policy.
It's a choice.
Now, in addition to the fact that none of the things that they're talking about have happened. There is nothing that is making the unvaccinated people a second-class citizen other than people are generally saying you should get vaccinated. Where are the passports?
I have a theory, Sam.
Papers.
I have a real theory about this. When we were all confused and angry about the CDC saying you can now go in without masks and you don't have to, all the rules changing, I think it was about the midterms. I think the Democratic Party wanted to deflate the balloon, knowing very well, maybe Biden, knowing very, very well, this is a little conspiratorial, I know, that herd immunity might be possible, that more and more people are getting vaccinated, that we're getting to that the non-vaxxers are just going to, and it's going to shut up the right wing, because at the end of the day, they don't have to wear their masks. They're not being forced to take vaccines. They may not be able to get on a flight, but whatever. That's your choice. It's the market.
I don't think that's conspiratorial. I mean, I think they saw, and I actually agree with this calculation. I think they saw the vaccine passport thing as some sort of hot button topic, and they're staying away from it. And I don't necessarily think it has that much of a material effect on, how we're progressing right now. And let me just say one more point, because it's so silly. Do you, that guy is, well, no, I shouldn't say that. I should, maybe he just wants to have Marjorie Taylor Greene's next affair, with her. He's really backing her up there.
He has to join CrossFit to do that.
Yeah, right.
Is it one of the, but it's clear, going on Fox News, they're obsessed with prolonging COVID. They're prolonging this fight because it's what keeps their base together, and they need to take it into the midterms. It's what it's going to keep them alive.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. Well, that's the thing, is they're running, this is a second order issue, right? They're now not complaining about, they can't complain about Biden's failure when it comes to COVID. So now they're complaining about his success, right? I mean, that's what this is ultimately about. It's attacking.
And this is so short-lived. The Giants, I'm going to a Giants game in the fall. They just announced they're going to have full capacity stadium starting in September. This is not going to last that long. Whatever, whatever gold star thing they keep trying to paint as this huge existential problem, it's not gonna be short. It's so short-lived.
I did this Fox News hit the other day, and it's what was so baffling to me about this was the message that they had was Democrats are now in bed with Big Pharma, meaning like Bernie Sanders Democrats, which that's what they led with, was like, you're a Bernie Sanders supporter, you're in bed with Big Pharma. I'm like, what are you talking about? The one senator who has proposed 3 pieces of legislation literally reining in on Big Pharma, but that's where they're going. They're now like, okay, well, we can't, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. Well, Democrats are big business because it's a populist message. They're speaking to Trump's populist conspiratorial base. They have to keep this going however they can. Don't take the vaccine. Don't infringe on our freedoms. Also, Democrats are in bed with Big Pharma and they're making all this money off of what?
They're floundering a little bit, but it may not matter.
But
frankly.
They're still going to win the midterms.
It may not matter. I mean, this is part of the right-wing floundering. Where will they go? What is the playbook when they can't figure out, like when they realize, like, wait a second, this whole vaccine thing and the papers, that's not going to work. And now Marjorie Taylor Greene has made it toxic. What can we talk about that will motivate our base? Tucker Carlson has stumbled on it again.
What President Biden did over the weekend is give all the Haitian illegal immigrants who came since the earthquake 10, 11 years ago work permits, this amnesty light, if you will.
Pause it for one second. I don't agree with the formulation of illegal immigrants for anybody. But people who are here under the TPS, the temporary protected status, are literally legal immigrants. There is a law that allows them to stay here that was passed decades ago, like in the 90s. The law exists. They are, the law calls for the administration to make assessments periodically, every 18 months, as to their situation. They are legal. So when he says allows Haitian illegal immigrants here, he's just lying even by their own terms. But start from the beginning. Sorry.
10, 11 years ago, work permits,
start
this
from the beginning.
amnesty
Start
light
from the beginning.
ends up being. What President Biden did over the weekend is give all the Haitian illegal immigrants who came since the earthquake 10, 11 years ago work permits, this amnesty light, if you will. And the justification has no relation to the law. They said, well, there's economic problems there and there's political instability. I mean, how does that describes half the world, quite frankly. There's no rationale for this. There's no legal basis for it. And yet, they're going to get away with it because nobody has any standing to bring a lawsuit to stop it.
I mean, Pause it. Why does nobody have any standing? Okay, well, I understand. Like, it's because it's legal. It's because it's legal.
And no one is being hurt. That's the thing. Right. There is no one is being hurt. We should say also that the Center for Immigration Studies is half a step away from just being a full-on hate group. But let's continue. Maybe not.
Bring a lawsuit to stop it.
I mean, Haiti, whatever its merits, has been poor and volatile for 200 years. So this is not a new development. That's insane. I mean, they're trying to change the population of the United States. And they hate it when you say that because it's true, but that's exactly what they're doing. Is anyone pushing back at all, at any level?
Well, not really. I mean, at the state level, the Texas State Attorney General, Arizona Attorney General are filing some lawsuits. There's a limit to what Republicans in Congress can do because they're in the minority in both houses. They can, if the filibuster is still in place, they can at least try to stop some bad things. But, there's a limit to what can be done until there's another election, assuming people are, in fact, dissatisfied with this. And the public opinion polling does suggest that while most voters are basically okay with President Biden, you know, he's got the sort of affable, grandfatherly image, the one place where he is underwater in public opinion, his big vulnerability, is immigration. And I'm not sure he has the flexibility to do something about it and respond to that.
Yeah, I don't think they care. I mean, you change the population, you change the country, you make your party stronger, you turn into a one-party state. At that point, it doesn't matter what people think. And that is, of course, exactly what they're trying to do. Mark Krikorian, I appreciate.
Do you think, let me just say this, do you think that Tucker sits around the office and goes like, ooh, we had a dip in our ratings. I need to get something back where they will not replace us. How can I get back on that thing? Oh, well, there's almost 150,000 Haitians in the country. Yeah, don't do the math on this in terms of what that represents in our population. They've been here for over a decade? Okay, yeah. We can shoehorn this. 150,000 people in a country of 300 million who have been here for 10 years. They're trying to change the population. They're trying to change the population. Remember, every 18 months, it's a permit to be here. You can't vote. Permit to be here.
They make it sound like you can vote.
What?
They make it sound like you can vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is there because there was a massive earthquake in the poorest country in the world. You saw the pictures of the shanties. And I mean, look how long it took when we have natural disasters in this country. How long it.
And he's gone.
Oh, I thought that. I'm so confused.
Let's wait a little bit. Sam's Wi-Fi
we actually lost
ducking out. Yeah.
The thing that infuriates me the most about this is obviously you should just have a segment called "The Quiet Thing Out Loud" for these people. But it's not when they're like Joe Biden is not popular on immigration. He's not going. Tucker Carlson is not going to win over the left. You know, the left like immigration movement. That's generalizing, but I'm saying that for a reason because Haiti, I guess, is included in that now. He's not going to win that over. So he's speaking broadly, not understanding that like he's trying to include the left that's been challenging Joe Biden and the Obama administration on their deportation policies and what's happening at the border and like looping in Haiti like that.
Yeah. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why he's looping in Haiti in particular. But I'm going to read some IMs while we try to get Sam back here. So Ryan Cole says, at what point does Tucker stop pretending and just grow the Hitler mustache? I mean, he's barely pretending, honestly, at this point. Sam's butt joint says, looking forward to the much anticipated follow-up to Blame the Electorate called Blame the Protesters How the Activist Left Has Failed the Democratic Party. And we've got our friend Samuel back. Hello.
Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on here.
Just as you were complaining about the country and how we recuperate after destruction,
it takes so long.
I expected it here.
Yeah, no, I mean, it takes so long for, us to recover in this country. The idea that there's 150, 160, 170,000 Haitians in this country who don't have the ability to go back. I mean, first off, I say we give them citizenship. They've been here for 10 years. They have created lives for themselves here. It's the only humane thing to do. But according to Tucker, this will replace us. It's almost as if Tucker's saying they will not replace us. It's almost like a theory he has, like a replacement theory.
Who's us, by the way? Are we included in that?
Well, I think if we
I'm very curious because if they block all, who's next?
Right.
I would love to ask Tucker about this theory. Who's us?
It really is stunning how naked that is. How naked that is by Tucker Carlson there.
Also, I like the point Dean Spade made earlier about natural disasters, as we call them, and actually the effects of them not being natural. Like, for instance, Haiti would have been able to respond to some of these things a lot better if it hadn't been underdeveloped by major Western powers and like put under debt peonage for centuries.
Yep.
Don't worry, Bill Clinton's foundation will save it.
Oh, that's good. That's good to hear.
You remember their big scandal there, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
All right, let's Ron DeSantis down in Florida is trying to be the heir to the Donald Trump legacy in our politics. He is basically just betting that Donald Trump is going to be incapacitated and can't run in 2024. Or maybe he's trying to vie for the Donald Trump endorsement. He signed a bill into law that would allow Floridians to sue big tech platforms for monetary damages. Who do you think that benefits? Here is DeSantis.
Have to be able to do it. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, hi. I want to ask you about the bill that you're signing here today. You're a loyal supporter of former President Donald Trump. Of course, Donald Trump is now a resident in Florida, and he was deplatformed. Is this bill for him?
The bill is for everyday Floridians. This is what we said, and it will allow any Floridian to be able to provide what they're doing. So, but I do think that's another issue that has been brought to bear. When you deplatform the President of the United States, but you let Ayatollah Khomeini talk about killing Jews, that is wrong.
Very Trumpian. I've been to a bunch of those like Trump press conference, or I had been to a few, and he surrounds like the whole immediate area with just sycophants who cheer as loud as possible when like there's some sort of challenge, or when they felt like there was some sort of adequate response by Donald Trump. But I heard James O'Keefe was there that day, by the way.
Is he investigating? I'm very curious.
He's in favor of this bill.
He wasn't investigating DeSantis? What a weak investigative reporter he is.
Yeah, he doesn't have the stomach for it, I guess. But yeah, I mean, there he is. There he is, right back there. I was wondering if I actually spotted him or if I just read about it. But I love the eye rolls from the sycophants surrounding him when the most obvious question ever asked is asked.
But like, also be careful what you wish for. All you need is like some leftist to sue on that. There's a lot of opportunities. I mean, it's not like tech is unilaterally against the right wing.
Well, I mean, I personally, the more problems that the tech companies have, in my estimation, the better. Because if they're unable to deplatform people like that, then it's going to increase the calls to do what I want to do, which is make them smaller, shrink them and make their business model less profitable, period. End of story. You cannot sustain size like this. And so, but it is clearly a sop to Donald Trump. It's also to allow DeSantis or any other person who wants to push disinformation as they run for office in Florida to stay on the platforms. That's basically the other part of the bill, that you can't deplatform a political candidate. So you are protected regardless of the BS that you're going to throw out there. And there it is. There's a bigger problem with these platforms. That's the bottom line.
I don't know if they're deplatforming political candidates. Donald Trump was not a political candidate when they deplatformed him.
He may be in the future. I mean, what's to prevent him from saying, like, I'm running for president?
A committee?
Yeah, all right. Well, set up a committee.
Is this kind of like tool? Isn't this kind of like Tim Heidecker's movie? Like, instead, like, you run just to get your Twitter feedback?
Yeah.
But sorry, just for a second, because there's a lot of truth to that. Like a lot of, on all sides, people run to build their brands. People run to raise money and build their infrastructure, or vice versa. They get in the media to run for office. It's always been this way. It's just now elevated. You don't agree, Sam? I mean, I could name 50 names.
I think that it is now complete. I think for a long time it was just a right-wing phenomena because they have a different infrastructure and the way that they hold their politicians to account is different. I think maybe it was also a function this time about the number of people running, but I think Alex Perrine made the point about Yang. Like, this is the first time we have a guy who is a political celebrity, insofar as that, like, as opposed to a celebrity politician, right? Like, AOC is a celebrity because she was a politician. Yang got to become a celebrity because he ran for politics, because he ran as a president. And so that model, it still is far more lucrative on the right than it is on the left, I think, but you lose an election and you go right into a sinecure, or you go right into the circuit on the right. On the left, it's a little bit, trickier, but people run now. It used to be, oh, you know how hard it is to run for president? You wouldn't do that unless you really are trying to win. Well, now it turns out like it's not that hard to run for president. It's hard to win.
No, it's hard to run too. You have to qualify for these things. And he positioned himself in a way.
I'm not saying the qualifications are high. I'm saying the actual act now is, it used to be much more difficult, like taxing, exhausting. But now there's a lot more latitude for you taking time off from your job as maybe a lawmaker or whatever it is. There's a lot more flying around. There's a lot more money associated with it than there was in the past. That allows you to go around and basically just do, I don't know, your pre-book tour, essentially.
Well, Yang, I think, okay, but you have to politically set yourself up in a position. I mean, somebody like a Marianne Williamson, I know everybody loves to use her as an example compared to Andrew Yang, but let's just remember she was a best-selling author with millions of followers, and she was not able to have the same experience as Andrew Yang because of her political positions. And I think her brand was actually hurt.
But let me ask you this. If you look at Marianne Williamson's book sales, pre-campaign and post-campaign, my guess is they go up.
I don't know about that. I don't know for sure. I think it might have been a net neutral. I don't know for sure. I could ask her, but we could ask her.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
But I don't think she was selling out book tour. I mean, I've been at her events before. I've known her for over for a long time.
She didn't need
it. That's what I'm saying. But they treated her. She was a celebrity going in, and I don't think she's more or less of a celebrity going out. Andrew Yang was an invention, and consultants, kind of branded this, and it's even easier when you're running in the city, for instance, where you have matching funds and consultants are like, this is not a new thing though. It's really not. I think it happens at a micro level all the time. They pick candidates, they prop them up, they build the infrastructure around them. Some people, not all, where an institution knows that if they can get paid off of the campaign because there's matching funds or not matching funds, they're business opportunities for organizations.
I agree.
For consultants.
But it's easier to run. If you look at the rhetoric from the pundit class 15 years ago, the answer is nobody's going to run because it is a thankless job. And to lose, it used to be if you lost in the Democratic race, you were shelved. You were shelved. And
unless you're Joe Biden.
Well, unless you're a sitting senator. I mean, you're a sitting senator, you go back. That's right. But Biden was relentless and really, look, if Obama doesn't pick him for VP, which was really Obama protecting his racist flank, right? I mean, then Joe Biden is inconsequential. He's just he ends up being Patrick Leahy, essentially, who's not inconsequential, unfortunately, but he's now off the judiciary. I mean, it's. But for the most part, you lose in the Democratic campaign, you're toast. On the Republican side, there was an afterlife. It's happening now on the Democratic side to a certain extent, but there's just not the same infrastructure. There's just not the same, Sarah Palin knew what she was doing when she quit governor. You couldn't have a Democratic governor quit and go on tour for 3 years. It just wouldn't happen. And it may in the future.
But they're letting Andrew Yang do this. I mean, he rebounded after his campaign, got a CNN contract.
Who's there? They.
No, that's what I'm saying. The media. I mean, a lot of people. He got a CNN contract after he said, listen, I've run for citywide office. They treated people like, are you kidding? Like Andrew Yang is getting, as much as they're like, oh, Andrew Yang's like making a lot of gaffes. No, Andrew Yang is incompetent and the reporters have not done their due diligence. I don't know, 2 years ago when he was running for president and then when he was on CNN saying absolute gobbledygook. This is not my argument. My argument is that there is value in running for president in the way that there wasn't 20 years ago. And the right had developed that value much earlier, right? Pat Robertson, when he ran for president, he was running to build his brand. He wasn't on the Democratic ticket. The idea of running to build your brand still, I don't think is as much of a play as it is on the right. It's changing. Ryan ran to raise his profile nationally. And he's running for Senate now in Ohio. Would this have worked if Bernie Sanders were not in the race? Like, would they have allowed such a large field? They, meaning the Democratic Party, like they can set the standards for who gets on the debate stage. They can, and they did all the time, change them like last minute, as we remember. But if Bernie Sanders were not there, and if if the establishment didn't need like 72 candidates to cancel him out.
If Bernie and Warren weren't there, then everybody would have dropped out, like, I think 2 weeks earlier than they did. Everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the only Marianne Williamson would have been the only one who probably stayed in at that point. Maybe a Yang stays in at that point. Try and get one more debate in, and that's it. And then it's done.
I don't know. I'm very curious about how Yang decided to run for president. I know who some of the consultants were, but I'm very curious, like, it takes a certain type of narcissist to run for president. It takes a certain type of narcissist who has absolutely no political experience or interest or ideas.
Well, I am sure part of it was like, hey, Donald Trump did it. Who knows? I could come out of nowhere.
Again, a certain type of narcissist to do that.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Guys, I don't know if you saw my tweet today. I'm running for president next cycle to force vasectomies on men because they're reversible. And I just wanted to use this opportunity to start my campaign so everybody knows now. In response, it makes you nervous. Vasectomies don't hurt. They're reversible. You may not have as much of a chance of impregnating somebody after the reverse, but still put some research and development towards that. Taking birth control your whole life doesn't help much either. So I don't know.
Sounds like you'll win a lot of male votes with that.
I'm doing it for the brand.
I just want to be late in the cover, late in line. That's all. I am Sam's raging Bill Duct. I'm sure you'll cover this. What are the best resources for finding mutual aid organizations in my area? I've come up dry on basic internet searches. That's a good question. You know what? Check out go to the Discord. Maybe we can set up a channel there where people will put it. We'll post those, but there must be a central a clearinghouse. That's a good question. What's that?
DSA.
That has like a mutual aid societies that are listed across the country?
No, I mean, if you're in a community that has
DSA
DSA,
is a good place.
There are lots of different mutual aid efforts that are happening depending on what your community is facing.
North Dakota llama. I've always found the libertarian view of people are inherently greedy and charity is the best way to affect change to be startling, but unsurprising contradiction. Indeed. Dr. Chaos, GOP infrastructure spending proposals are like bad anti-Semitic jokes. The Democratic president goes to Congress and says, I need $2 trillion for infrastructure. The Republicans in Congress say $2 trillion. What could you possibly need $700 billion for? I can't believe you're asking me for $600 billion. Could you really spend all $500 billion? I mean, it's outrageous that you would ask for $200 billion. Cosmo Pun was deployed with FEMA to the Caribbean after Irma and Maria to help with the disaster response. The Disaster Survivor Assistance DSA cadre, which are the blue vests going door to door to check on people, was told numerous times not to provide food, water, et cetera, to folks because those responsibilities were for nonprofits. We were there explicitly to help people finance the repair of their properties, pharmaceuticals, and medical equipment. Did help a lot of people, but your guest points on too late really hit home because I had to tell people over and over. It would take at least a month for the funds to arrive.
Wait,
Crazy.
who is that and where were they? If they could write back. If they were in Puerto Rico, I'm very curious because
they were in the Caribbean after
Maria
Irma
was,
and Maria. I don't know.
Irma was
Cosmos
the first
Pun.
Cosmos, message me if you are watching this.
Emma, will you take over for a minute? I've got to just drop out. My voice is also starting to go, so I'll be right back.
Yeah. Okay. No worries. So just I wanted to pull this up because Brendan just sent it to us that the latest New York City mayoral race poll is out with Catherine Garcia with her first lead of the contest, up 1 point over Adams. Do we know what the margin of error is?
Who
Brendan?
did it too? I'm curious.
It was Emerson and Pixel 11, and it was only 570 likely voters surveyed.
What's the undecided?
So let me just get through
the poll thing hasn't been released yet. It's being released tonight.
Garcia at 21%, Adams at 20%, Yang at 16%, Stringer at 10%. Yang's seen a precipitous drop in the past few months. So, I mean...
There's a lot of people that saw that coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not shocked by that, but I'm encouraged at least I think enemy number one in terms of preventing the most conservative candidate would be Adams now, not Yang.
Of course. It's always been Adams, in my opinion. Yang was always going to be somebody who, because the more, it's not that he's dropped also, it's that more undecideds have decided.
Yeah.
And so that's played. But again, this is ranked choice voting. So I think Catherine Garcia, not just because of the New York Times endorsement, but New York Times endorsement,
They also, because it worked out so well with Klobuchar and
it's different though. It's different.
And Warren. I mean, they endorsed two people.
No, but it's different with New York City voting because they're targeting certain demographics that are very likely voters in communities where there's high turnout and like high percentage of reading the New York Times. And that is, I would not be surprised at all if certain neighborhoods that are likely to turn out in a low turnout election and off, year elections decided that they're supporting Catherine Garcia, and that plays into Eric Adams. But I still think Eric Adams is going to win because it's ranked choice. And so you'll see the dynamics play out where Catherine Garcia first, Eric Adams second in likely turnout, high voter propensity communities. So it's different than the presidential. It's completely different because New York's, this is like the turnout is so low in New York City. You just have to keep, it's who can turn out the base, right? Who can turn out, who's most likely to turn out. And Adams has Brooklyn for the most part, as he's Brooklyn borough president. He has the Orthodox community split between Yang and himself, which is a significant portion of Brooklyn. And Catherine Garcia probably has the west side of Manhattan and maybe even part of the Upper East Side. And I bet you Adams comes in second in those communities. So you start to play this out and Adams is gonna, that's just my call. I've decided who I'm voting for finally. It came to me in a dream. Have you guys decided who you're voting for?
Well, I'm really going to be making a calculation based on polling even as it gets closer because it's the 22nd. So we got a little bit of time, but who are you voting for?
I don't know if we're announced yet.
Oh, okay. I had thought about Stringer, but it's just like, I don't know, man. I don't know.
He's given me no reason to vote for him. Sam!
Sam's gone again.
Sam! No! I wanted to hear who he was voting for. What about you guys? Do you know who you're voting for, Matt and Brendan?
I'm voting for whoever pays me the most.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Venmo or whatever else, whatever you use. Just start sending me money, and whoever has the most at the end,
You're back, Sam.
I'm back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing this for like 5 years, and not once has the mayoral candidate tried to grease my palm a little bit. And
Yeah, it's kind of offensive.
I vote in the 19th. So.
Oh right. Oh man, change your. What are you doing, dude?
Well, I mean, I may change back, but for years that was a big vote.
You can always switch back then too. Just go back and forth. Just when they need you.
I don't know. It would be I'm inclined to vote for Garcia at this point, but I don't know what number 2 or maybe.
Why Garcia?
He's
he's frozen.
again.
Sam, this is.
Wait, let's just.
Oh, there he is.
Sam, this might.
Again?
You're freezing again. Let's just. Yeah. I thought he froze again.
Oh, it's driving me crazy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, like I haven't, I don't know from a strategic standpoint how to calculate the ranked choice voting. I just don't understand, like what the best strategic. I haven't spent enough time thinking about from that perspective.
I know that I'm just like leaving, in terms of who I'm ranking. It's all about preventing, in my view, Yang or Adams from moving on. I know Adams probably will, but that's at that point, that's what I'm 100% sure about what I'm going to be doing in terms of my vote.
And this is just me, like, this is theoretical. I'm just playing a game in my head. I have no idea if this is the first time we've had ranked choice voting, so who knows how it's all going to play out and what communities like peak. Like, there's also a lot of there's a rapid transformation of New York happening post COVID. So how is that going to play out?
Right.
Is there going to be low turnout in neighborhoods that normally have higher turnout? I don't know. Maybe we should do a day where we announce who we're we lead up to it, and we announce who we're gonna what our numbers
I just
are.
did.
No, but you have 5 choices.
Maybe we should.
Uh-oh.
I faked you out. I
was like, Alma, now she's frozen. Stop it.
I moved my eyes a little too soon. Dang it.
We could do a big lead up to this because everyone wants to know.
Okay. Well, let me do a couple more IMs and then we'll get out of here. Reginald Kirk, good at it. I checked out my Ouija board and Michael approves. That must have been the DJ Dan Arkey who sent us an updated, edited interstitial between the fun half. Love the edits to the fun half song. Sounds less choppy now. Snowflake says what? Melancholy. That WAPO sports writer probably was blocked by the paper union rules. When I was at the San Jose Mercury News, I was not allowed to make radio TV appearances without pre-approval. I was DJing on a college radio station. I just stuck with my air name. Stupid rule. Yeah, no, they had hired him. He was a regular host. KCPD says Joe in Kansas City is about to sue the mayor for attempting to move a portion of the police budget to local control for community services and prevention. It's not even a big change. The police would still get to negotiate with the city on what is done with the money. But hey, police chief kneeled with protesters last summer. Surprise, that didn't fix everything. That's pretty bad. Let's see, a couple more. Sam's SDI pan swirl. Hey, Nomi, any clues as to why Jumaane Williams is not running for mayor? Isn't the public advocate position supposed to be the launching pad?
I think he's running for governor.
That's an answer. Tom from Yakubia. Sam, I'm in Minneapolis for the observance. Tomorrow I'll be heading to the 49th state, my ancestral homeland of Matt Leck. Can I get a Fargo lunch recommendation? A Leck rec, if you will.
Oh, the burger place downtown, Jail Beers. Oh, and there's also a Vinyl Taco, I think, a taco place, but those two.
Ryan Cole, at what point does Tucker stop pretending and just grow the Hitler mustache?
How many times is this going to come up? I love it.
Evelyn
No, I read
Garcia.
it when Sam was.
Oh, you read it? Okay.
Yeah.
Sam Zaddy, it would be great to see you debate Tucker and see him just nod and agree how much of a prick he is. Also, you're missing an opportunity to not including your thriving story in your Tinder profile. Guaranteed swipes. Peace. And the final IM of the day, Sam's butt joint.
Oh, we read
I read this already.
Sorry, never mind. The real final IM of the day. Did you read tags? Tags. Does anyone think Tucker saying Haiti's been unstable for 200 years is sort of a dog whistle referencing to Haiti gaining its independence from France in 1804?
I meant to make that point.
That's why it's been destabilized, yeah.
Damn it, I forgot.
Probably. All right, folks. Nomi, great show. See you. People check you out in 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
And Emma, Matt, Brendan, also great show. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,